cards you can play with Summon, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and today I want to go over my preview of the Mulan faction. This extra video was unlocked with community points from solving puzzles, which means we all get the Disney and 10th anniversary content faster, so keep solving puzzles if you want videos more frequently. Mulan is another faction from the upcoming Disney expansion, and it focuses largely on power counters, which are noticeably absent in the Marvel expansion. Mulan is rated as a low complexity faction, and I would say that this is accurate, but we need to talk about the definition of low and how it relates to Smash Up. With some videos, I prefer to present the cards and then draw my conclusions, but for this video I want to start with my overall point. I think Mulan is a few key tweaks away from being a really interesting faction, but as it stands, my unfortunate take is that it is boring for me, and that's a shame. This is a bit controversial, but I like having the complexity assessments of factions. I think they help on a number of levels, and Smash Up should include everything from low to high. I can enjoy low complexity factions. I enjoy dinosaurs, even though I am hard on them. The question is, however, what is appropriate for a low complexity faction in a game as complicated as Smash Up? My opinion is that, somewhat like Shield, Mulan either doesn't give new players enough credit, or tries to lower the bar past what is realistic for Smash Up. If Mulan is intended to be a teaching faction, I have concerns, because I think it encourages some objectively bad decisions. They power creep extensively, but that's also the solution, because I feel like Mulan wants to be a come-at-me faction, but isn't, because I'm not sure come-at-me is possible at low complexity because it's difficult to do, both from a player and faction perspective. So let's look at the cards and see why. Starting with their leader, Mulan, you see the overall theme that gaining a power counter matters. In Mulan's case, you have a talent that could be TDAC, but could also be an extra action. And I will say that for me personally, this is really about the extra action, because Mulan the faction might be drawing too many cards otherwise. The three soldiers of Mulan have the same benefit, but as an ongoing, which is honestly more interesting because, unless you are caring about the fact that it is a talent, the ability to draw cards in other turns and other phases is more important. And I also believe that it's more important for Mulan to focus on what she can do differently than the others. But it's also fair to ask, how are so many characters getting a power counter each turn? And that's where Mulan starts to break down for me. The idea of the three soldiers is interesting because you get a unique benefit on play, but each has a chance for card draw with no artificial limitations other than your chance to play power counters. But there are two problems. The faction doesn't really allow for this, and shouldn't encourage it even if it did. Let's look at one of their double features, Prepare to Fight. It places two power counters, but on a single character, not spread out among your characters. I don't know if they compensate for the lack of spreading out by giving you a card draw for free, but it doesn't feel like your cards are working together, and then, besides the card draw, there's still the issue of continually adding power to the same base without really having much of a plan if you add too much. In fact, this can be really jarring to new players if they do all this work only for someone to swipe the base from them really efficiently. In some respects, Shan Yu mitigates this, but unless it is your turn, this can be played around. I suppose the idea is that Mulan can slow you down while keeping the pressure up, but again, this hasn't really worked in practice because the actions are their best source of power counters, but the actions are also the form of destruction. We have the other double feature, which is the seemingly obligatory Seeing Stars, which I think works against their context, but there's also Avalanche, and this is another bad incentive in my opinion. Avalanche seems good on paper because it can clear away a lot of minions, but if you can clear a lot of small minions, it means there is a lot of power there, so just try and win it. You have a bunch of power granting actions and a special that can steal, so use them. In fact, the game's helper instructions tell you to push your minions out of avalanche range, which is again harder by the lack of spread counters. So if either of these scenarios present themselves, the base should be close and winnable, so just win. With Mulan having no recursion, this means that you may be using your recruits to place counters, and they aren't incentivized to gain counters themselves, so they will be lost to the avalanche as well. It's a lot of work to avoid hurting yourself, and thus I have never found the situation where I play this card. I just read this as a conflict of interest, but I also have to remember that I'm coming into this as the bandit, not a new player. But I do have to ask, what lessons are we trying to teach new players with Mulan? Especially when IP is involved, it's rare that I feel like art matters in terms of ability, but I feel compelled to talk about the elite Lei Shang, an archer. I feel like being an archer should have been a big clue that instead of having a local ability, this should be range support. With Li Shang on the same base, you are just dogpiling and power creeping and will be extremely susceptible. But if you spread out, that means that Li Shang can safely hit your 3s, allowing them each to grow, obscuring your targets and maximizing your card draw. But Mulan has no movement, which means they'd be stranded, and I feel like that is a miss. Ultimates were deemed low-medium, so could one movement card have been so bad? What they do have to trigger multiple characters per turn is group training, the Disney equivalent of Jolt, as well as Be a Man, which actually has the granularity to spread counters. They do have a somewhat nice change of Ling into Crikey into another 3, but again, if you do that, you are forfeiting 2 of your card draw engines, and if a new player leaves that out on the first turn, they are going to get wrecked. Also, I feel I must point out that Mulan even manages to violate the Sonus rule, and I feel like it's 2022, why are we still doing this? In my experience, Mulan can win, but it's harder for them to do so, and it hasn't really been fun, just scripted. And not in a locals challenging kind of way. Still, Mulan does have some partners that can make some of their cards more interesting, and I'm not considering other power counter factions, but rather those factions who can make Mulan's unique qualities work. Unfortunately, I wouldn't give any of these factions to a new player, but they still work well for the experienced. Part of Mulan's problem is that they have actions that only affect one character when you'd like them to affect more. Disco is well equipped to do this, with We Are Family giving you a chance to add 4 counters and draw 3 cards if you set it up on 2 of your soldiers. While their destruction is capped, Disco's copying of it is uncapped, which can lead into some nice Shan Yu solo plays. With the Disco recursion, this could be your game plan all game long. With the Diva copying, you don't have to add counters every turn and can focus on setting up and copying during the burst. One of my pet peeves about Smash Up is the inconsistent nature of who gets power increases, whether it's you or anyone. Mulan is at least consistent that anyone can get the power, and this can matter to mages because mages can play monsters. Adding power counters actually slows down the process, but then you can charm them to get the power back. But on top of that, if Mulan is going to overdraw, you may as well discard those cards for benefits. Since the mages speed through their deck, you can do some fun plays where you hoard your card draw base 3s, play them with some Enchanted Evening, use Wand Whiz for an extra action, then play group training to draw as many cards back as possible and refill your hand. This deck does have a bit too much destruction, but Happy Zapper as a 3 is a good finisher to Crikey. One of the advantages of the soldiers compared to Mulan is that they can trigger every turn. You just need a way to gain counters on someone else's turn. Fae Fighter is unfortunately not global on placing the counters, but can still facilitate extra draw. Given the Elven specials, growing big and using the other player's turns as opportunities really plays into their strategy. If you overspend for second, use Helping Hands or run away and solo the next base. This creates the type of lead necessary for Come At Me to work. With elves, you also get a nice assortment of abilities like movement and recursion. It helps to think of the elves as a Come At Me faction who wants to lose, and having a total of 4 specials to manipulate something really helps. Is there a basic Mulan combo that really excites me? Unfortunately not. Maybe there are some in pure Disney, but I haven't played much of Disney only, and besides, it's okay that I know what I like. But if you are watching this, Mulan may be like the shield of this set. Serviceable but simple, when it could have been so much more. Are you excited to try Mulan? And who will you play with them? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.